Welcome to my review of 1989's Space Harrier II, or perhaps more specifically the 2010 emulated version. Yeah. So, there will be no spoilers in this video, nor will there be any objectionable language, and this was a game that I really loved. I'm going to start with some kind of general stuff about arcade titles from around this time, the time that it originally came out. For those who might not remember, and I am somewhat including myself, I was not very old when this originally came out, but I did grow up playing games from this era. So, where today we have all these checkpoint saves and essentially infinite lives, like the extra life system is much less common today outside of like retro releases and that sort of thing. Yeah, back when this came out, you start with, I think, a few extra lives. If you lose all of them, I think you pretty much just have to start all the way over from the start of the game. There is technically a level selector, but it apparently only allows you to play that one level. This is what I've read. Play that one level, then it starts over. Anyway, this is the sort of game where you basically have to get really, really good at it by playing it a lot of times. If you don't use an emulator, it is unlikely that you're going to be able to get all the way through this the very first time you play it, even if you're amazing at other games from the time. And let's see. Yeah, I think that is more or less what I wanted to say about that. By today's standards, fairly simplistic, but, addictive and engaging. And that might just about cover the sort of general... Yeah, obviously, stuff like graphics and controls is also very of the time. So, moving on to more specific stuff for this game, more than I accidentally already did. Yeah, with emulation, you can save scum. There's a rewind feature and stuff like that, and I don't personally think it really, cheapens the game that much. It does kind of open it up to people who can't do, with my wrists, my carpal tunnel, I cannot possibly do this in a single sitting. And I decided to also use the rewind feature, and it can take you about an hour to get all the way through it if you do that. And I guess that is what when you look this up online, that is what it says, 1 to 2 hours of gameplay. So I guess people were going off that already. I'm not sure I see how you'd be able to get all the way through this in an hour without an emulator. Anyway, yeah, let's see, because, the gameplay is still really, really challenging. It doesn't suddenly magically, mean that you have a really easy time. There are some games where if you can rewind, it becomes easy. It is very much a test of your reflexes and ability to strategize, think fast. I have not played the first Space Harrier, and that is not the only reason that I feel slightly awkward about even doing this review, but, maybe the following will change. Right now, this is not actually for sale. I swear I'm not trying to make this my whole thing now. I've done... several of the most recent reviews I've done have been these games that you can't actually... At least not on the Steam store. I haven't checked everywhere, but This used to be part of the the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Classics bundle, which was discontinued, and there's been some negative chatter on that, understandably so. And yeah, maybe someday it will be for sale again. Yeah, or if let's see, if I understand correctly, right now you can't really trade these games. Maybe at some point in the future that will become a possibility. I obviously bought these before they were removed from Steam Store and did not get around to them until now. Again, carpal tunnel, struggling with that on and off. Yeah, well, on and on fits as well. I would say the game this most reminds me of is Raptor Call of the Shadows. This is basically that game with pseudo 3D, this sort of third-person camera angle instead of the top-down. Only one weapon for the player, and that basically does cover, so with the pseudo 3D, you can move in three dimensions, which is always good to shout at, what's his name, Zach, if he forgets, and so can your enemies. So it has that thing of, like in Raptor, some enemies will move in a sort of, what's the word? Formation, and you have to not be where they fly to when they get too close to you. And like in Raptor, you can choose where to be on the screen. You can be in the middle, in any of the four corners, anywhere else in between those points. It's up to you, but you'll want to make the right decision. And since I've already mentioned the rewind and quick save, quick load features, to be clear, even if you know exactly where an enemy is going to go, that does not necessarily mean that you know exactly where to be. Like, at most, let's see, I don't... No, yeah. There are some enemies that are going to break out of any kind of, break out of a pattern, or part of their pattern is they're going to go be where you are standing. So you have to get really good at, part of it is just memorizing, you can't always guess exactly where an enemy is going to go the first time you see them. That's a matter of pattern recognition, which is part of why it's so exhilarating, because at the end of the day, like, it's one of those games, it's hard to say if it's fair or unfair, because technically, once you pick up the pattern, that's it. It's just frustrating that you might die if you don't rewind and, before emulating this. If you played this without emulating, you might die because you didn't magically figure out where exactly the enemy was going to go. Sometimes you can kind of deduce it, but not always, especially the first time you encounter an enemy. But yeah, they're going to try to be where you are, some of them, and a lot of them are going to try to shoot where you are. So even if you're rewinding, you still have to figure out, it might not, you might have to rewind the same spot several times and try out different places to stand. Now, let's see, right, yeah. So, like in Raptor, Call of the Shadows, the character, will fly at the same basic speed. All you can do is move, where you want him to be on the screen. And let's see, you have the, what's it called? Right, and to be clear, I'm not saying it's like worse than Raptor Call of the Shadows. I think this came out before that, so obviously that would be quite unfair. But yeah. You as you fly through a level, there are obstacles, some of which can be shot, others of which have to be dodged, and some hypothetically you could shoot them, but you're busy shooting something else. And then there are enemies, and yeah, destroying enemies gets you, earns you points, which translate into extra lives. And some enemies can block your fire, and various enemies, some of the enemies will just try to fly into you. Some of them will, or otherwise move into you. Not all of them fly. Some of them will, let's see. Yeah. Yeah, I think that might just about cover that. So it is one of those games that are, it's easy to get into but difficult to master because, like, within moments you understand movement and shooting, but the game does, start at a pretty high level of intensity. It doesn't let you gently into. Now, something I had to read somewhere, the game doesn't tell you, if you press A as the game is starting up, you'll be taken to a menu where you can set the difficulty, which, as far as I understand, just determines how many points it takes to earn an extra life. And there's an auto fire, which basically just means that instead of pressing the fire button every single time you shoot, you can hold it down for these short bursts. You still have to let go of the button and then press it again because you can't fire that many projectiles without having to. But yeah, I quite appreciated it for my carpal tunnel. There's apparently also like a inverse flight controls thing, which I don't know. I'm sure someone was really, really into that. Now, I did do a little bit of research. So some of the things that, some of the player and critic feedback, others praise the fast-paced gameplay and arcade feel. And this is the pseudo 3D visual style and bright surreal graphics were innovative for the SEGA Genesis at launch in 1988. And the soundtrack, the memorable tunes, fit the game's futuristic, fantastical vibe. And many said it was nostalgic because it was just like the first one. And the variety of bosses with creative designs and an element of excitement, variety to each level. That was also something, I really loved having to figure out exactly where to be and when to shoot and such, because, that's another thing from this time. Sometimes the weak spots are very, very obvious, like visually, but you still have to find the right time to shoot it, because if you attack at the wrong time, you're going to get attacked. And I forget if I mentioned, one hit costs you one life. Now, some of the criticisms that it received were that the gameplay's repetitive. Levels and enemy patterns often feel repetitive. The game lacks depth over time. Very true. Some players find the controls less smooth compared to other shooters, making the game frustrating, especially during precise maneuvers. I don't think I've played enough of the shooters of this time to say for sure, but I suppose I can somewhat see that. And clunky frame rate. The game sometimes suffers from slowdown, particularly during heavy action sequences, detracting from the fast-paced experience. No major innovations. Critics mention it doesn't add much new compared to the original Space Harrier, which leads to disappointment for players expecting more evolution in the sequel. Difficulty balance. While the challenge is part of the charm, some players feel the difficulty can be unfair or unbalanced, with certain enemy attacks being hard to avoid. And I am so glad to be doing video games again. I can't even put into words how much I missed this stuff. And right now the plan is to do every single game. There's like over 50. I'm not doing one. I'm not doing all of them in a row. I'm going to space them out a little. I'm probably going to do 2 games from, more recently, and then back to this. 2 more recent, then back to this. The Sega Mega Drive Classics collection. But yeah, as far as I can tell, I'm not really intending to skip any, even though some of them are really not my kind of game, but I'm going to try. Yeah. Let's see. I guess I could just very briefly talk. So emulation, like, it's gotten some criticism. So far, I haven't had any problems. It runs completely smoothly, no crashing or bugs or anything. But maybe I'm just lucky. Like, I know a lot of people have had problems with games for Windows Live, and I've never really had any problems. And I've spent substantially more hours with games for Windows Live than I have on this game. This was what it was, it like, I think, 1 hour and 7 minutes in total. And yeah, but I think that does cover absolutely everything. Right, as with others of the time, it has fairly minimal story. The story essentially is just words. Like, they're fun, but they're basically just justification for you shooting a bunch. Right at the very start and the very end, there's some story stuff. And it's one of those where, it'll say what year it's set. And I don't think I want to give it away, but I'll just say it is wonderfully absurd of a number. Just like, essentially, we can't even really fathom as far into the future as it's set. So, yeah. I really, really love games from the period this came out.